Okay. Perfect.
Yes. Hi, Colonel. I'm Io. Thank you for being here. We've got a lot of members of the community who are very curious about what you have to say. So let's just dive in. At the top, I just want to flag to everybody participating that there are two phases of the debris removal process. One is already underway. It's being done by the EPA, and that's to deal with toxic materials. So we're going to do a separate interview with the commander from the EPA on Tuesday at 6 p.m. You can find that link at postfirela.org. So we're not going to cover much of that stuff. We're only going to focus on phase two debris removal, which is what Colonel Swenson is in charge of. A lot of people have questions about how the debris removal program is paid for, which does also veer into insurance questions. We already did an insurance expert Q&A. We will do more, but the short answer, so that we don't have this a bunch of times through the course of this, is that it really depends on your individual policy. So some simple terminology for people who are participating to hold on to right now is that dwelling coverage A refers to the funds that are in your insurance policy. They're all broken down in different buckets. And dwelling coverage A refers to the money that you have to rebuild your house. And the specifics about whether or not you have debris removal coverage will be in the pages of your policy. And you'll be able to check what that looks like. But typically your debris removal coverage, according to Chris Mooney from Tugboat Claims, who we did our Q&A with, is on top of your dwelling replacement coverage. So we'll get into more specifics about that. But just so you know, you can ask ChatGPT or Google Gemini. You can upload your policy in there and ask it to give you specifics on your policy. So that will answer a lot for you. I also want to flag that for you to get a good sense of how much coverage you have, you'll want to get a grasp on your square footage, and that will also help answer a lot of the questions that you might want to ask Colonel Swenson tonight. So, Colonel Swenson, thank you for being here. If you could just please introduce yourself quickly and give us like a brief overview of who you are and the work you're doing, that would be helpful.
Yeah. Well, good afternoon or good evening, and thank you for having me on to answer some questions about the private property debris removal program. My name is Colonel Eric Swenson. I normally command the St. Paul District of the Army Corps of Engineers, but I was asked by the Army Corps to come out here to be the recovery field office commander for the Corps' debris response mission here in Southern California.
Great. In layman's terms, that kind of means you're the guy in charge, right, of phase two?
Yeah, it means the guy in charge of phase two. That's right.
Great. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to dive into how it works because people have a lot of questions about specifics around that. So the EPA, they made a website available where you can track the process of phase one. Does phase two begin as soon as the EPA is done? Because we've heard that it'll take 2 to 3 months for them to clear properties. We've also heard it takes 2 to 5 days per house. So like, let's say I'm looking at the EPA's website and it says that my house is done. Does that mean that the Army is about to come in and get started, or do I have to wait for the full EPA process to finish?
That's a great question. So in theory, in practice, when the EPA completes a parcel and it says phase one complete, essentially I can start phase two as soon as I have a validated ROE given to me by the county. So an individual homeowner would have to sign the right of entry. They would have to opt in, which means they want the federal government to do their private property debris removal. They'll have to determine if they want their foundation included or not. And then that goes to the county. The county will then review to make sure that they are the legal owner of that property. And when that process is complete, they'll send it to me. Once they send it to me, that right of entry is my permission granted by the homeowner for the federal government to come on their property to remove their fire damaged home and or foundation, depending on if we're taking that. So okay, it doesn't have to wait till the end of the, so all the phase one is done. It just has to be each individual property is done with phase one and I have the right of entry.
Okay, so an ROE, for those who are on the call, an ROE is a right of entry form. It's available at recovery.lacounty.gov. If you are opting into the government's debris removal program, the sooner you fill that out, that's the main thing standing in the way. After phase one is done, that's the only thing standing in the way of the Army getting in there and clearing your property. How long is the process for each house? And is there a way that we can know ahead of time if the Army Corps of Engineers is going to be there?
Yeah, so great question. The process takes anywhere from about 2 to 10 days per crew, per parcel, per house. If you have a standard, say you had a 2,000 square foot home on a quarter-acre lot with a slab on grade foundation, you're probably talking 2 to 4 days. If you have a multi-tiered home on the side of a cliff where we need specialized equipment, you're probably talking on average 8 to 10 days.
Got it. How many crews do you have working on this total?
So we have the ability to scale up our number of crews based on how many rights of entry we have. I expect that at some point we'll have over 100 crews working at any given time across both fire impacted areas, and could be far more than that. It really depends on how fast I get the right of entries. So I don't want to bring crews on and not give them work. So I have to have work for them. Right of entry is key to me understanding how much work I have at any given time.
Understood. What is the, I've heard 18 months as the total timeline for phase 2 completion, but it sounds like that could go a lot faster for people if they fill out an ROE and are on top of it.
Yeah, so we're estimating that we'll have this work done in 1 year in about 1 year, we'll have the work done. Some people will get their properties done, in a month or a month and a half. And if you're the last person to submit your ROE, you're going to be closer to the end.
I would imagine for efficiency's sake, are you guys going to go, how does it work? Are you going to be going block by block? Are blocks where everyone has opted in going to be prioritized? I've heard that thrown around. I would imagine for efficiency's sake, you're not going to go one crew at a time back to all of these different places. And if you're starting in one area, are you working in a certain direction? Can you walk me through the logistics of how that works?
Yeah. So we want to work everywhere all at the same time. And what I mean by that is we want to spread our crews out to both fire impacted areas. And we want some space between each crew, because we don't want to create traffic jams with all of our vehicles moving in and out of various choke points. So we're not going to focus on, the east and go west or west and go east. We're going to kind of focus everywhere all at the same time. So we spread our teams out, and we don't impact each other, right? We don't impact residential traffic for people who have reoccupied their standing homes. We want to be good stewards of the roads. What we would love to happen is for whole neighborhoods to submit their ROEs, and for us to get, if there's a neighborhood of 36 homes that all were impacted, if I had 36 rights of entry when I awarded, that contractor to go do those 36 homes, they could send 2 or 3 crews into a neighborhood, and they would start at, house number 1, house number 13, and house number 25, and they would just work their way around the neighborhood. So that way, residents wouldn't have to call me to ask me what their status is. They could go back to the neighborhood, they could see where the crew was at, and they would be able to predict how many days it was going to take to get to theirs. And a question you asked before, which I didn't answer, is will residents be notified? And so we will notify residents, 3 to 5 days in advance, and then the day before, if they want to come out and watch debris removal. We want them to be part of the process.
Okay, so that's like a big question that people have, is can they participate in the debris removal process? Can they tell you, I love this tree, don't take it, don't touch that, or whatever? Can they dictate specifics around the debris removal process?
So to some degree they can. When they fill out their right of entry, there's a sketch on there, and they should put, when they fill out the sketch, they should put anything that's maybe important to them that they would like us to take special caution around. We generally don't do flat work, so driveways, patios, we generally don't do flat work. And, if they had some feature they wanted us to be on the lookout for or be careful around, we'll certainly try. Trees are a sensitive issue because we have a certified arborist go out and look at all of the trees, and we're looking to see, is this tree at risk of dying either now or in the next 5 years? And does it pose a risk to public health? And so if you have a huge lot and it was way in the back, it would probably not pose a threat to the public. We might keep it. But if you had one that was kind of near where the house is that posed a threat to our crew or to the resident when they move back in, that will likely be marked and then removed as part of our process. Again, we're here. The whole purpose of us being here is to remove the public health threat caused by the fire. We balance public health and safety with people's love of trees and try to find that happy medium.
So when you say public health, you're not just talking about whether that tree is going to fall over. You're saying if there's another fire, will that tree light your house on fire?
No, really, just is it going to fall and hurt you, after we're done, or is it going to fall on us, right? And for the majority of trees, it's fairly easy to tell. It's the ones that have minor damage that it's hard to say sometimes if they're going to come back. But we don't make that decision without having an arborist, and we're willing to talk to residents if they have a specific desire to try to keep a tree. We'll try to work with them and explain the risks and come up with some kind of a agreement that works for both.
Got it. And just to circle back on that question about if there'll be any like tracking of progress available online anywhere, is that a thing that's happening?
Yeah. So like the EPA, we'll also have a public viewer webpage up once we start that people will be able to go and get some basic information about their property and and its status in our.
When are you starting? I would imagine that's already probably underway, given that the EPA is already on the move.
So we've started. We have actually started with several schools that we received from the Pasadena Unified School District, and so we started those yesterday, and we haven't started our first phase 2 private property debris removal on a residential lot yet because we haven't yet received a validated ROE, but we anticipate getting some this week.
What's the difference between us signing an ROE and it getting validated?
So an individual can sign an ROE. There's a couple things that could happen there. Maybe they're not eligible because they didn't have they filled out an ROE. Maybe they had their fence burned, but their house is still standing, so they're not eligible for they may not be eligible for the program. And FEMA makes eligibility determinations, not the Corps of Engineers. Additionally, maybe the tenant was renting the home and they wanted to get their lot cleared, so they filled out the ROE on behalf of the landlord, and we can't have a tenant give us the right to enter. It has to be the rightful owner. So the county has to validate all of the rights of entry to make sure that the person who signed it is indeed the rightful owner, and they're able to give us the authority to be on the property.
Do we have any understanding of how long the county is going to need for that process? Because I know a lot of us have signed ROEs.
Yeah, we believe that we're going to start getting our first ones this week, and once they start, we should be a steady stream of them.
Okay. Okay. So what I'm hearing is like it's kind of hard to know what people can expect for their timeline, but like roughly, if I submit my ROE today, can you give me a ballpark how long until the Army gets there, and I can guess from there based on what you said about the number of days to clear the lot?
Yeah. I mean, it really depends on when we get it from the county. Let's assume you submitted yours first, and I get it from the county on Friday. You'd be one of the first properties we would do, and you could have your lots cleared maybe, in the next month or 6 weeks, maybe sooner. It just depends on, how many we get in the first grouping and how fast we can get our crews out there.
Okay.
It will go. We'll think. So.
Okay, that's heartening. Can you just quickly speak to private debris removal and what your opinion is on that, and whether anyone should be pursuing that or why they would not want to?
Yeah, I think really it's a personal choice whether people want to go at their own or do the federal program. I mean, I know that you talked about insurance earlier. I mean, you're never going to get a bill from the Army Corps of Engineers for the work that we do under FEMA. So it's not like there's a costing from us. Now, you acknowledge that there's some constraints with insurance, and if you have, you get insurance paid out for the same thing. Again, that's not my lane, and I know you had an expert on previously to talk about the insurance aspect. So I'd encourage people to if they have insurance on their home, to call their insurance company and see what their policy actually says, and what they could have to, essentially pay back the county based on receiving a payout for debris removal and having the Corps do the work. But they're never going to get a bill from the Corps. If you do it alone and you hire a private contractor, essentially you have to follow all the same rules that the Corps has to follow in terms of any identified hazards on the property, hazard trees, where you place the waste, how you transport the waste, has to be properly wrapped. It has to enter the right waste stream. So recyclables have to be recycled. Fire ash and debris have to be properly wrapped and transported to an appropriate landfill on an appropriate route that's already pre-designated. So there's a lot of, but for the individual homeowner, they have to learn all of those things, and their contractor has to follow all those things. And what we've learned in the past is that can be expensive, and you basically have to pay for that out of your insurance premium for debris removal or out of pocket. So again, I'm not here to say that you shouldn't do it. I just, you have to understand what it's going to cost, and then if it's something that you're willing to do. Plus, if you sign up with a contractor and they don't do it correctly, essentially, you're on the hook to get it done right. And there's no guarantee that the price they quote you up front is the price that it's actually going to cost you once they're all said and done, and they've disposed of all the material in the appropriate waste stream. With ours, you get a guarantee it's going to be done right.
Certainly. Is there any additional, or let's reverse this question, is there any control or ability to input about things that people want to keep that they would lose by working with the Army Corps of Engineers?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. People have like special landscaping features to their home that maybe they have been passed down from generations, or they collected, from Eaton Canyon, and they want to keep these rocks or whatever. Generally, we don't take rocks, we don't take flat work. So I would encourage people, when they fill out their right of entry and their little diagram, if there's anything they want to let us know, and then we'll call them, certainly a day before, and invite them out to come and watch. And so before we do any work on the property, the crew that's going to do the work does what we call a 360 inspection. So the crew walks around the property and identifies anything that the owner put on their right of entry, and we'll take any feedback from the homeowner, so that we can try to respect any property that they want to keep. Obviously, if it's a fire damaged item, we want to remove the public health threat, but we're certainly, we treat every individual, or we try to treat every individual, not as a client, not as a customer, but as a partner. And we want to make sure that we do this work in a meaningful way with people, and with people's consent. And in my experience in doing this in the past, the residents really find this to be a meaningful experience, as it's the sort of last step they need to take before they enter the rebuilding process.
Yeah, indeed. How do you guys deal with swimming pools?
Yeah, so we don't take swimming pools. If a swimming pool happens to be integral to the foundation, we'll find an appropriate place, and we'll basically use a concrete cutoff saw, and we'll just cut that section away and leave the pool intact. We will put a chain link fence around the pool, not permanent, just one that's on little stands, and that way, in case someone walks on the property and doesn't realize there's a pool there, they won't fall in the pool. So, and then that fence becomes the property of the homeowner when we're done, right? It's just they just get it. It's for the purpose of guarding that pool. If at some point the homeowner rebuilds and puts a new fence up, they just keep that fence. It becomes homeowner property.
But generally, like, the headline is you guys don't take pools. Do you drain pools? Because a lot of people are saying that they have pools that are filled with like ash and water and things like that.
Yeah, we'll hand collect around the pool, and then in the past we've used some of the pool water if it's appropriate as part of our erosion control plan. So maybe a question you're getting is, how do we keep the dust down? One of the ways is we use water. So we'll spray down the lot because we want to make the ash a bit damp so that when we scrape it, it doesn't go airborne. We want to keep that out of the air.
That makes a lot of sense. We have a lot of questions about that, which I'll get to. If somebody's pool is filled with filthy toxic water, water that's obviously been filled with ash, is that then drained by you, or do they have to get that drained separately?
I guess it depends. I mean, I we're working with the local health department, and if there's I'm not sure what the local health department policy is going to be on that. Obviously, if you have standing water in hot temperatures, you always run the risk of potentially attracting mosquitoes. So the health department may put out some guidance on those, and I don't know. I just know that in the past we've, if the water's been available and it seemed acceptable by the community, the health department we've used it in the past as part of the erosion control.
Okay. And in regards to foundations, people are very concerned about their foundations. A lot of people are on a raised foundation. Some are on slab on grade. And for those who don't know, slab on grade means that you're on a pad of concrete. But a lot of people in Altadena, for example, are on raised foundations. Is there any benefit? Can you just walk me through why someone would choose to leave their foundation and whether the recommendation is to have your foundation taken if it's been through a wildfire?
Yeah. So again, a little bit outside of my expertise. I think just the pros of having the foundation removed are if you decide to rebuild your home, a new home, if you build a new home on an old foundation, then you're tied to that foundation. Second thing is, and most people have never built their own home, and most people buy a home, and so if you may not like your new home design may have a completely different foundation style. And so you don't want to be tied to the old foundation. The other thing is that we found in previous fires that when the fire burns as hot as this one did, it can change the strength characteristics of the concrete. And so some builders and engineers won't certify that foundation is acceptable to build on. And so people worry, would you want to build a $500,000 house on a bad foundation? Most people would say, I'd rather, build my house on a strong foundation. And so they want to redo it. But there are some foundations that cost an awful lot of money to put in, and maybe it's worth having, some strength, concrete engineer, soils engineer, structural engineer come out and do some analysis on that foundation, and maybe it could be reused. I will say, as part of the right of entry, when the homeowner signs up for it, they basically indemnify or don't hold the government harmless for any incidental damages done during the debris removal process. We will use heavy equipment, and heavy equipment can damage foundations or flat work. Again, we don't try to, but when you put a heavy piece of equipment on concrete, it could cause some damage. So again, it's the individual homeowner's personal choice what they want to do. I think if I was a homeowner, I would assess the age of my foundation, the structural integrity of it, maybe think about how hot the fire may have burned on it, and then the type of home I want to rebuild. And if any of those, if you have any question about any of those, I would probably consider having it removed.
Yeah, for those who are on the call, I think that the advice that I'm hearing is for you to get an expert opinion. And if you don't know about foundations and you're in any way unsure before you fill out the ROE, consult with a contractor or structural engineer and make sure which one you want to go with, because having a new foundation built is potentially very expensive. Having an old foundation in place and having to remove that after the fact is also potentially very expensive. What about septic tanks? People are concerned that their septic tanks may get cracked from your equipment running over it, or that their septic tank may be removed when they don't want it to be. Do you guys test if septic tanks are still intact? Do you remove ones that are damaged? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So again, when the homeowner fills out their right of entry, if they have a septic tank, I would have them sort of draw on that diagram where approximately the septic tank is, and certainly let us know that they have a septic tank so that we can look for it ahead of time. We'll do everything we can not to damage a septic tank or any infrastructure, but again, we are talking about heavy equipment and an awful lot of ash. So although we try not to cause any further infrastructure damage, I can't guarantee that we're going to be able to avoid it. But if we know about where it is, then we can try to work. We will work with the owner and try to work around all of those areas, and maybe we just hand collect debris right around that area. Certainly, if we don't know where it is, the chances of us damaging are greater.
So just to recap here, if somebody is on a raised foundation, as in it's not a slab of concrete, and you don't have a septic system, which to my understanding is most of the people in at least Altadena, it might be wise to just have this process done because you're not going to be able to build on what's left of your raised foundation. And if you don't have a septic tank, there's not much risk of that being run over and cracked, or that, the Army damaging things, including your driveway, unless it's hyper fragile. Can you talk about the decision? My understanding is that the Army is going to remove 6 inches of soil. Can you talk about why I sat in on a conversation with you and Mark Pastrea from the County Public Works, and I didn't really get an understanding of why you guys chose 6 inches. Is that the recommendation? Why is that enough? Are people going to have to do more?
Yeah, I think the state of California has done some research over the years. When you think about when you have a fire, gravity pulls the debris basically down to the ground. If it's on a hard surface like a foundation, when you remove the debris, and if you remove the foundation, then you'll get all of anything that was hazardous will kind of come out with the debris and the foundation. But anything that's outside of the foundation but inside of the ash footprint that's earth. Any of the hazards will be sort of on the surface, and so we remove 6 inches of that surface just to ensure we get any of the hazardous materials that may have landed on that topsoil. We won't do area outside of that ash footprint. We do not want to take 6 inches from the entire lot. That would really impact the homeowner, because then they would have to come back and maybe add soil later, which is also expensive. So we really try to take the minimum amount we can, but 6 inches on the outside of the foundation and on the inside of the ash footprint, we found is an acceptable level to remove any of that surface ash that landed on the soil.
And what about the rest of the lot? I mean, obviously it would have gotten a lot of ash on it and other things. Is any remediation going to be done on the rest of the lot?
Yeah, we don't do any remediation. If there's little bits of debris that may have, partially burned wood that might have, been just outside the ash footprint, we would probably hand collect that material. But no, we wouldn't do anything that. We don't do anything with shrubs either. Hazard trees, we take hazard trees, because again, it's in the public safety. But a burned shrub is not really necessarily a hazard, right? It may not be something that's the homeowner wants to keep, but it's not necessarily a hazard.
What about sure. What about fencing? I would imagine like if fencing burned, or there's like debris from fencing that's like around the lot perimeter, you guys would take that?
It depends. Generally we don't take fencing material, like stone fencing material. If it's some fire damaged wood, we work with the contractor on the site, and we would probably collect it. It has to depend if it was eligible or not. Every property might be a little bit different.
Okay, so then that kind of leads into the next section of questions, which is like financial stuff. Is the Army going to bill insurance companies for the maximum coverage that is available for debris removal under the homeowner's policy? Or I guess, let me put it this way. Let's say a property has a bunch of wood fencing around it. I opt into the program. You guys have cleared my lot, but you haven't taken all of that. And I then have to go get private debris removal after the fact. And I only have a limited amount of coverage in my policy. Is that amount still there? When in the process do you guys bill? Is it after my house is built? And are you going to go for the full policy limits?
Yeah, so the Corps of Engineers will never send you a bill. The county, you under federal law, a homeowner can't take a duplication of benefits. So you can't get an insurance payout and have the government come and do this, do work that the insurance is supposed to cover. So the exact same work. So as long as the debris that you have paid for out of your insurance premium is authorized by your insurance company and not part of my program, then there's no duplication of benefits. But you can't have your insurance company pay you to remove your foundation if I remove your foundation. That's what we call a duplication of benefits. Again, not my area of expertise. I would highly encourage people to talk to either FEMA or their insurance company on the specifics of that. But the law is generally you can't take, money, two pots of money for the same exact purpose.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, FEMA is in charge of the financial side of the debris removal process and billing people's insurance?
So the county will be the one that would send a bill when this is all over to either the insurance company or to the homeowner, and all that is explained in the right of entry. But if you have questions, back to the county, or I'd go back to FEMA, FEMA runs the overall program for the federal government.
And is that, do you know if that billing process happens once people's homes are rebuilt, or do you know if that happens as soon as you guys are done?
Yeah, I don't know how long that takes. There's certainly 12,000 plus parcels. I don't know how long it takes. I'm assuming I would say it's not instantaneous, but I don't know. That would be a question for probably the county, or probably a question for the county.
Okay. And do you know anything about how the Army is billing, and are you guys billing, is there some price point on per square foot of removal charge, or that's just outside of your scope altogether?
Yeah, we work, this program the service we provide is funded upfront by FEMA.
Okay.
And so there's no, again, if someone offers you, if someone drives up to your house and says that they're with the Corps of Engineers and for $50,000 they'll clear your debris, you should write their name down and let the authorities know, because we will never show up to your property and ask for money. Everything is done through a right. We will call you and we will show up when we say we're going to show up, and we will conduct debris removal, and then we will leave.
Understood. I won't get into the weeds on insurance questions, but some people have California Fair Plan and they don't have any debris removal coverage. When the Army or the messaging is this is a free program, what that means for them is as soon as they fill out the ROE, you guys will clear that debris whether or not they have coverage. And if someone is uninsured, for example, and they will never see a bill.
Yeah, you'll never see a bill from the Army Corps of Engineers. Again, if you have private insurance, you can't receive a duplication of benefits. So as long as you're not taking the same money for the same debris removal, then you should be fine. As long as the money that you're spending is, you've talked to your insurance company and they said that it's eligible under your under your insurance policy.
Okay. Okay.
The biggest thing is a lot of people that I've met through these fire responses, before the fire, they had insurance, but they had never really read their policy, or they hadn't read it in a long time. So my advice to people is to, get a copy of your insurance policy and really spend some time, reading the insurance policy. And then my other advice would be just like everything, just save all of your receipts, right, as your paper trail for what you spent money on and what you didn't spend money on.
A couple of questions that are coming in. You mentioned not taking flat work, but what if our driveways are fire damaged and we want them gone?
Yeah, normally we won't take your flat work or your driveways.
Okay.
We'll probably rent. If there's a car on it, we'll remove. Part of our program is to remove title property, so boats, trailers, cars, jet skis, that sort of thing. We would take. And if it was on the driveway, we would just wash the driveway kind of wash that area down, but we wouldn't take the driveway.
Got it. So if somebody does have a driveway or anything flat that they want removed, are there any other things that are outside of your scope that people might be able to opt into via private debris that one would expect would be gone if it was fire damaged?
I mean, we cut trees off. We don't take the stumps out. So, I mean, that's an area that people might, if they want their stumps out, that's something we don't do under our program. Again, if you have a concrete masonry unit block, like a block wall, cinder block wall that goes around the perimeter of your house, or maybe you have a hand laid stone, fence around your property. We don't normally take those because even if they had some fire damage on them, they're not necessarily load bearing. They just hold themselves up, and so they're not really a threat to the public safety. So we would leave those behind.
Understood. Okay.
Now, like the house wall that's leaning over and about to fall, then that's something we would have to, remove because it's at risk to our crews or to the homeowner when they return.
Mm-hmm. Sure, that makes sense. Okay. A question that came in is some experts say ash debris, large and small, will become airborne during cleanup, but it will be localized unless there are high winds. Can you just talk about ash? And obviously everyone in LA is really scared about the air right now and all of the toxicity going in the air. I know the EPA is removing toxic materials, but we're also aware that a lot of the toxicity is in the ash. And you were mentioning wetting it down. Can you just talk about the process of dealing with the ash and how it's kept safe as it passes through communities and then where it's going?
Yeah, so we do debris removal in what we call as a wet method, and that is before we start to remove any debris, we're going to spray the property down with water because we want to make all of that ash really wet, right? So that the wind can't blow it as we go to pick it up, and then we'll scoop all the ash out with excavators and skid steers, put it in the back of a plastic lined dump truck. And then before we leave, we will wrap the bed of that dump truck to make sure that none of that ash or debris flies out during transportation to the landfill. We also have personal air monitors on all of our employees, and we have perimeter air monitors around the site. And then we usually do a sensitive site air monitor downwind of our location, and that could be at a standing residence that's standing, that's been reoccupied, or could be, a school that's been reoccupied, senior center that's been occupied. Just as a way to kind of gauge, how our wet methods are working to keep the dust down. And so if we're not maintaining the appropriate air quality, then we'll either add more water or we'll change our method to ensure that we keep the dust down, because really we're trying to protect our crews who are in this ash footprint, but we're also trying to keep this site as safe as we can for the public.
Understood. Is there a number, since you guys are using all independent contractors, is there a hotline, or where can people call if they have complaints or they're noticing that a contractor is not following these protocols and they're not wrapping it well and things are whatever, falling off the trucks? Is there somewhere that they can reach out and file a complaint?
Yeah, so if they have questions about the debris removal process, I'll give you a number. So it's 213-308-8305.
Okay,
and I have an email as well. That's the debris call center. So I have a call center set up here, and they'll take calls in both. We have currently English and Spanish. So they will take calls and answer questions about debris, and if they don't have the answer, or we can't answer that question, we'll try to direct you to the person that, the agency that can answer the question. I'll give you that number one more time. It's 213-308-8305. We also have an email address. No. Yep, it's SoCal Wildfires, all one word, at USA USACE.Army.mil.
Okay, so that's USAC like Charlie, E like Echo .mil.
.army.mil.
Army .mil.
.mil. Yeah.
Okay, great.
So USC is U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. That's our abbreviation.
Got it. Okay, so you mentioned how you were going to be splitting up. It's ideal for you guys to have crews in a lot of different places because you don't want to clog the streets. So is there a way that ROEs are prioritized, or is that kind of just done in order of when they come in?
Yeah, so we take our priorities from essentially the cities and the counties on how we're going to approach debris removal. And I don't have them yet, but in past fire responses, we normally focus on areas that are near ecologically sensitive locations. First, we also like to focus on areas near standing occupied homes so that the people that have come back to live in their homes, we try to create as much of a buffer around them so they can sleep, easier at night knowing that the debris immediately around them has been removed. And then we generally like to work from the outside in, because the outside is where people are normally occupied and we work in. But I did say we're going to work everywhere all the time, and that's because I can't put all of my crews on the outside. But to the degree possible, we try to work, diligently on the outside, which is closest to the occupied, usually closest to the occupied homes.
Understood.
Acknowledging that in this fire, there are some pockets of homes that are surrounded by homes that have been impacted. So, those are certainly high priority areas for us.
Understood. A lot of folks are asking, I'm just going to jump around here as questions are coming to me. A lot of folks are asking what specific markings on the trees mean.
Yeah, so the EPA put some markings on trees and we put some markings on trees. They should be similar. Generally, the EPA might mark a tree if it's a hazard tree for the work that they're going to do during phase one. And then our trees usually has a tag at the bottom, and then it'll have a marking on about a couple feet up. And that's so we can track we pay our contractor by a tree. And so we have to make sure we mark the tree, and so we can account to make sure that they're getting paid for the work that they're doing and not a dime more.
Is there like a system or symbols that people can recognize so they can keep track of whether their tree has been marked for removal, or like some are saying that they've seen one line or two lines? Just any of that. What are those hieroglyphics?
Yeah, I'd have to go out and look at some of the trees. We just started doing we do our own phase one hazardous site assessment, which is where our arborists go around and mark trees. So I have to go out and see how they're actually marking them. But usually you'll see like a data tag kind of at the base by the ground, and then there'll be a line or two lines, several feet up. And so they'll cut it in between, and usually 12 to 24 inches above the ground. And then there'll be the tag at the bottom. And then on the tree that we remove, it'll have the marking so that we can account for that. Essentially we can go back and ensure that the trees they were supposed to take that they took. And I also have a Corps of Engineer employee that'll go around with all those crews to make sure that they're following the contract and taking just what they're supposed to take.
Understood. Should people anticipate a lot of traffic during the debris removal process, like a lot of trucks in and out of, let's say, Altadena or the Palisades?
I think residents who have returned will notice an uptick in traffic. I don't think it's not going to be, or it shouldn't be, this line of trucks lined up for a mile. We'll probably move somewhere between maybe 600 and 1,500 trucks a day across all of the fire impacted areas. So, there's miles of area that were impacted. So yes, there'll be an uptick in traffic, but I don't think the average resident within a neighborhood will. I don't think it'll be too disruptive, but there will be an uptick in traffic. And okay. The faster we get done, the faster we get out of here, and we can leave the residents of this community to rebuilding their lives and livelihoods on their property.
Yeah, that's what we'd all love. People are asking about, there's a lot of concern about the toxicity on those trucks. So I know you mentioned that you were going to completely wrap the trucks, but like, let's say somebody has children that are on a playground or at a school a couple of blocks away or a mile or two away. Can they rest easy knowing that that wrapping system is like proven and safe?
Yeah, it's a really heavy duty plastic that's similar to probably a little bit thicker than what you'd have if you bought a construction trash bag at your local home center. It comes in a big roll, and we completely wrap the truck bed, and then we put the tarp that the truck has on top of it to hold it all down and tight. And you shouldn't see anything blowing off. Certainly, if someone does, if you could call our hotline and let us know, we would appreciate it. But we have really good crews, and many of them live in this area, and they're vested in this mission as well, and in their families' health and well-being as well.
Yeah, that's helpful to know. What about is the EPA going to assess toxicity on the sites before you guys go in? Is that part of what they're doing?
So the EPA's mission is really it's akin to what most communities in the United States do every year when they do a bulk pickup day. Where usually most communities, they have a day where you can drop off your old motor oil, your old tires, your old batteries, and communities will, there'll be large dumpsters and people will put that stuff in there, and then the local recycling company will haul that away and properly dispose of it. So the EPA is basically doing the same thing, except the difference is that they're going onto the property because the homeowner is not there, and they're collecting these paint cans, these propane cans, and they're properly disposing of them like you would do on a normal day in Altadena, maybe once a year. You would so that the community is interested in doing this because they don't want homeowners to just throw their paint in the regular trash stream, like their old paint. So communities do this so that we keep residents from improperly discarding lithium-ion batteries, tires, etc. So that's essentially what the EPA is doing. Is they're going to pull up in the street, they're going to go in and grab any like partially burnt paint cans. They're going to put it in a container, put it in another container, put it on a truck, bring it to a transfer site. So think about 30 properties. They're taking all the material off 30 properties. They're bringing it to one location. They're putting it on a bigger truck, and then they're hauling it to the appropriate place to be disposed of or recycled. So that's really what the EPA is doing. And there's a lot of confusion about what is a toxic and essentially these are just household hazardous materials. This could be a partially burned can of bleach. This could be an aerosol product. This could be a spray paint can. It could be, oil-based or latex-based paint. It could be a propane tank. If you have scuba divers and they had some scuba diving tanks in their garage, we want to get those type hazards off of these properties so that when my crews go in, they can focus on just the regular sort of debris, household debris that comes, the burnt timber and other things associated with a house fire. But really, the EPA's role is really, it's a function that most governments do every year to help residents get rid of, properly dispose of sort of common household items. They're just doing it rapidly because they want to get these off of streets. Because if you think about your paint can, if you leave the lid off and you leave it out in your yard and it rains, you're gonna get paint on the grass, and then that's going to absorb into the soil, and we don't want that to happen. So right now they're uncontrolled, and the EPA wants to get them controlled.
Understood. So
yep.
What we've all understood in the last couple of weeks is that a lot of the toxicity is coming from burned appliances and asbestos that was buried in those walls and all of the materials that were burned. So what I'm hearing is that there's kind of a misnomer with the EPA taking all the toxic stuff, because actually there's a ton of toxic stuff in the ash and debris that you guys are going to be taking. So actually, like, a lot of the toxic stuff is still there until phase 2 is done. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we like the hazardous material that's left behind after a fire, is present in lots of ways. The EPA is taking sort of the worst of those materials, the stuff that if it rained or if we got, if it's just laying on the ground, we want to get it contained as quickly as possible, which is why they operate under the governor's proclamation and they go very quickly through these homes because they want to get that stuff that's visible and they want to get it contained. We go back in and do the rest of it. And we do asbestos chip testing on foundations. And so if we find asbestos, then we will mitigate the asbestos before we do the debris removal.
Okay, one last question.
Which could the amount of time it takes us to do a lot. Obviously, if we find asbestos, it might increase our time.
Sure. I know you have a hard out at 7, so I just want to ask you one last question, which is like, is it possible to amend an ROE with more specifics after someone has filled one out?
That's a good question. I don't know how the county is managing those. That's a question I would call the county on. And they have, give me a sec. They have a phone number. I don't want to give you the wrong one. If you type in, here it is. It's 1-844-347-3332. I'll say that one more time. 1-844-347-3332. That's LA County's fire debris hotline, and they probably can answer that question.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, Colonel Swenson. I want to let you go because I know you have another group to talk to. We appreciate you taking the time and all of the work that you're doing. For those who are on the call, you can go to postfirela.org and you can submit any questions that you have. You can also go to our Q&A page and make requests going forward for people that you want us to talk to. This conversation has answered a lot of questions and left a bunch unanswered. So specifically stuff about financing and insurance, and a couple of questions about toxicity and things. If the Army is not taking certain stuff from your home and you may be stuck with other debris removal bills, I know that's going to be an outstanding question. So we're going to get those answered, and we will set up additional Q&As. Also, just a reminder, on Tuesday at 6 p.m., I will be talking to someone from the EPA about all phase 1 debris removal questions. So go to postfirela.org. Also, please join our Survivors Network if you haven't already, and we'll keep getting your questions answered. Thank you so much, Colonel. Good luck with your work.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Here.